As a startup lawyer and two-time software founder, I've watched countless founders sign contracts that they've never seen before and try to understand what they're agreeing to in the middle of actually agreeing to it, which is a tough position to be in, and it's exactly why I wanted to make this video. My firm handles every contract a startup signs across its entire life cycle. So today I'm going to walk you through every category you'll deal with as a founder and what you need to know about each one before you sign. Let's get into it. Formation contracts. The first category is your formation contracts, starting with the incorporation documents that legally create your company. That includes your certificate of incorporation filed with the state of Delaware, plus your bylaws, which set the internal rules for how your company is governed. Make sure you're incorporating as a Delaware C corporation because almost every investor will require you to convert if you're an LLC, and converting later costs you legal fees you didn't need to spend. Then, once the company exists, you sign your founder stock purchase agreements. This is the contract that issues shares to you and your co-founders, sets your vesting schedule, and defines how the equity gets split. One detail to lock in early is the 83B election, which you have to file with the IRS within 30 days of signing your founder stock purchase agreement. Otherwise, you'll get hit with a tax bill on your equity as it vests, instead of paying tax once at the very beginning when the stock has almost no value. And the last contract in this category is your first round of IP assignments. An IP assignment is a standalone contract that says anything you create for the company is owned by the company. Every founder needs to sign an IP assignment on day one, because if you don't, the company doesn't legally own the technology you built, and that single issue can completely blow up a fundraise or an acquisition years down the line. Team contracts. The second category is your team contracts, which cover anyone who works on the business with you. That includes employees, contractors, consultants, and any vendor contributing to the product itself. For full-time hires, the main contract is the offer letter or employment agreement. This sets out the role, compensation, equity grant, if any, and the terms of employment. Make sure the offer letter includes IP assignment language, or have your new hire sign a separate IP assignment, because without it, the code or designs or ideas or documents they create technically belong to them and not the company. Now, for contractors and consultants, you need a properly drafted contractor agreement. This covers scope of work, payment terms, timeline, and most importantly, who owns the deliverables when the work is done. I see founders using generic contractor templates pulled off the internet all the time, and a lot of those templates don't actually properly transfer the IP to the company and have a ton of other issues. So make sure your contractor agreement has a work for hire clause and IP assignment clause built into it. Then, once you start handing out equity to non-founders, you'll need a stock option plan and individual option grant agreements. The option plan is the master document that sets how many shares can be issued as options and the rules for issuing them. And each option grant is the individual contract with each employee. So the moment you start promising equity to key hires, document that grant in writing, because handshake equity promises are one of the most common things investors flag in due diligence. Commercial contracts. The third category is your commercial contracts, which covers everything tied to customers and vendors. The depth of what you need here scales with the size and sophistication of your customers. The first thing is your terms of service and privacy policy. Terms of service is the contract every user agrees to when they sign up, and your privacy policy explains how you collect, store, and use customer data. Now, if you're a software business, these documents are not optional, and the terms need to limit your liability, define how your service works, and handle things like termination, refunds, and dispute resolution. Once you start selling into bigger companies and enterprise customers who want their own contract in place, you'll need a Master Services Agreement, or MSA. The MSA is the main contract for enterprise deals, covering payment terms, warranties, indemnification, limitation of liability, and termination rights. So the four provisions that matter most are termination, warranty, indemnification, and limitation of liability. These are the same provisions an acquirer will look at when they buy your company, so getting them right early pays off later. You also need vendor agreements with the third parties you rely on. That includes your hosting provider, payment processor, any tools that touch customer data, and anyone that you outsource work to. The clause to watch for is change of control, because some vendors and customers will try to terminate or renegotiate the moment you get acquired, which can directly affect your purchase price. If you're handling personal data from customers in regulated regions or fields or industries, you'll also need data processing agreements or DPAs. These cover how you handle customer data in compliance with privacy laws like GDPR or CCPA or HIPAA, and most enterprise customers will require one before they sign with you. By the way, if you're at the point where you're drafting any of these contracts and you want a lawyer who focuses exclusively on the stuff to help you, click the first link in the description and book a free consultation with me. Now let's keep going. Fundraising contracts. The fourth category is fundraising contracts, which are what you sign when you take outside money. There are 3 types of fundraising contracts, and the one you use depends on the stage of your raise. The first one is the SAFE, which stands for Simple Agreement for Future Equity. The SAFE is a template contract that Y Combinator created back in 2013, and it's become the standard for most early stage rounds because it lets you take investment without having to set a valuation up front. The investor's money converts into equity later when you do a priced round based on a valuation cap or discount you agree to, and most rounds under $2 million today are done with SAFEs. The second one is the convertible note, which is structured as a loan that turns into equity when you do a priced round later. It carries interest, usually between 4 and 8%, and has a maturity date typically 18 to 36 months out. Convertible notes are most often used for bridge rounds, but when you need cash between price rounds, but in general they're less common today than SAFEs at the very early stage. The third one is the price round, which is when you actually set a valuation and sell shares at a specific price. The main contract here is the stock purchase agreement, but it comes with a full suite of other documents like an amended certificate of incorporation, an investor rights agreement, a voting agreement, and a right of first refusal and co-sale agreement. The voting agreement is the one to pay closest attention to because it governs board composition and what major actions require investor approval. And it's the document where founders give up the ability to make major decisions on their own, so this is one you absolutely need a lawyer reviewing before you sign. Exit contracts. The last category is your exit contracts, which are what you sign when an acquirer wants to buy your company. And every contract from the first 4 categories either holds up or causes problems for you at the acquisition stage, because all of those documents get reviewed during the buyer's due diligence. The first document is the NDA, or non-disclosure agreement, which the buyer signs before they get access to any of your sensitive information. The NDA protects your financials, your customer list, your team's compensation data, and the fact that a sale process is even happening. The NDA is super important. It protects you from the buyer just gathering data on your business and using that data to compete against you. Because some buyers will use the due diligence process to just find out as much about your company, your technology as they can, and as I mentioned, will use it to compete directly against you. But then once both sides are actually interested, the buyer will send a letter of intent or LOI. The LOI sets out the proposed purchase price, the deal structure like asset purchase versus stock purchase, the exclusivity period, and the timeline to closing. Most of the LOI is non-binding, but the exclusivity clause is binding, and it locks you out of talking to other buyers. So push for 30 to 45 days max. After the LOI, the main contract that gets drafted is the purchase agreement. This is the definitive binding contract that governs every dollar, every liability, and every post-closing obligation in the deal. The most important section for you as a seller is the reps and warranties, which are factual statements you make about your company. And any rep that turns out to be wrong or untrue gives the buyer the right to come after you for damages after the deal closes. Finally, you'll have ancillary contracts that get signed along the purchase agreement. That includes your disclosure schedules, which aren't necessarily a contract by themselves, but rather they become a part of the purchase agreement and they lay out every exception to your reps and warranties. Then there's also the transition services agreement, which defines what support you're going to give to the buyer after closing. And disclosure schedules usually are delivered right before closing, and a lot can change leading up to closing. And the disclosure schedules are the final chance to reveal to the buyer anything that might have changed about the business. And I've seen disclosure schedules almost tank deals. The practice in most deals is to wait until the deal is almost closed, to literally be at the closing table to deliver the disclosure schedules, and it's pretty standard and typical, as I mentioned. Buyers will push sellers to deliver the disclosure schedules, and they'll anxiously await the delivery of the disclosure schedules to see if there's anything that shows up that wasn't caught or revealed during the diligence process. So if you're a startup founder and you want a lawyer who handles every one of these contracts for you, from incorporation all the way to your eventual exit, click the first link in the description and book a free consultation with me. We'll go through where your company is right now, identify which of these contracts you have in place, which ones are missing, and which ones need to be cleaned up before they cause you problems down the line. Again, you can book your free consultation by clicking the first link in the description. And if you want a full explanation of why startups are specifically Delaware C Corps, then check out this video next.